Today, we're going to talk about Neptune and its influence over the next 14 years, what it may bring to the world, and which area of life it will activate for each zodiac sign. If you want to understand how this transit might play out in your own life, try to remember the period around 2011-2012. What began in your life back then? What theme has been unfolding over all these years? Because now, many things may either come to an end or move into a completely new phase. To better understand the energy of this planet, just look at how social media has transformed our lives and our perception of reality over the past decade. Yes, that was Neptune in Pisces. For 14 years, the planet of dreams, illusion, and compassion moved through the sign of imagination, inspiration, and blurred boundaries between reality and fantasy. And what are social media platforms really? In many ways, they create an illusion of life. Filters, perfect photos, beautiful images, a single moment captured on the screen, while behind the scenes, the reality may be completely different. So for 14 years, until March 2025, Neptune was in Pisces, the sign where it feels most at home and where its energy expresses itself most strongly. Pisces is a water sign, soft, receptive, and often associated with feminine energy. It's also the final sign of the zodiac. Now, on January 27th, 2026, after its retrograde period, Neptune fully moved into Aries, where it will remain until 2038. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, active, bold, and masculine in energy, connected with leadership and the beginning of new cycles. And with this shift, the way Neptune expresses itself over the next 14 years changes completely. Neptune can manifest both positively and negatively. In Pisces, it was the energy of dreams, fantasy, and idealization. Neptune is often associated with illusion. It rules cinema, beautiful imagery, rose-colored glasses, and that kind of otherworldly love where we idealize a person or an idea. Neptune also represents people uniting around an idea. Religion, for example, is a very Neptunian theme. People coming together because they believe in something greater than themselves. And this entire theme of illusion and beautiful imagery became extremely visible over the past 14 years through social media. Just look at how YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook have grown during this time. Platforms that barely existed before. What else happened during those 14 years while Neptune was in Pisces? Pisces is the sign associated with escaping reality, and Neptune itself is connected with things like alcohol, drugs, or any way of dissolving into something and stepping away from reality. During these years, we saw many countries legalize marijuana, another very Neptunian theme. Overall, Neptune in Pisces brought strong themes of compassion, spirituality, religion, and empathy. It's a soft energy, accepting, understanding, and forgiving. But now Neptune moves into Aries, and that brings a completely different speed and tone. Aries is fast, impatient, and action-oriented. On a global level, this could activate a very different narrative, one about heroes, pioneers, and leaders. This is no longer about patience, it's about conquest and exploring new frontiers. Over the next 14 years, we may see major technological breakthroughs, perhaps even more active exploration of space or missions to Mars. But the most important thing about this transition is that Neptune did not enter Aries alone. Saturn entered Aries as well, and that makes this moment especially significant. There is already a video on my channel about Saturn, so make sure to watch it. You'll find the link in the description. A conjunction of Neptune and Saturn is rare in itself. They meet roughly once every 30 years, but each time in a different part of the zodiac. Neptune in Aries, however, happens only about once every 160 years. Saturn symbolizes rules, laws, structure, boundaries, and new systems. So when Saturn joins Neptune, it often marks the formation of a new reality, new rules of the game, new laws, and sometimes even a new world order. It's especially symbolic that their exact conjunction occurred on February 20th, 2026, at 0 degrees of Aries. 0 degrees Aries is the very beginning of the zodiac, the starting point of everything. The previous conjunction at exactly this point happened roughly 9,000 years ago. Because of this, alignments like this often coincide with major shifts in global eras. It's a moment when the old world gradually fades away and a new one begins to take shape. If we look at history, the last time Neptune was in Aries was about 164 years ago, and during that period we saw major historical events. For example, the abolition of serfdom in Russia and the Civil War in the United States. In other words, those were times of profound transformation. So it's very possible that the world will once again experience deep changes during this new cycle. Another important theme of Neptune is that it removes illusions. It shows us where we were seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. Sometimes entire systems collapse on a global level simply because they can no longer sustain themselves. The same process happens in our personal lives. In our individual birth charts, something may disappear, dissolve, or fall apart, because suddenly we see clearly that it was never what we thought it was. Very often, when Neptune changes signs, it brings disappointment. We may have believed in something for a long time, placed someone on a pedestal, or idealized a relationship or idea. Sometimes for 14 years, while Neptune moves through a sign, we live with hope or uncertainty as if everything is wrapped in fog. And then, at the moment of transition, the fog clears. Suddenly, everything becomes obvious, and decisions that once seemed impossible become easy. The exact Neptune-Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees Aries on February 20th, 2026, will be felt most strongly by the cardinal signs Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. When something significant happens in one of these signs, the entire axis becomes activated. But in reality, everyone will feel this influence. The cardinal signs will simply experience it more strongly. To understand where this energy will show up in your personal life, look at which house Aries occupies in your birth chart. That area of life will be activated over the coming years. On a global level, Aries represents new beginnings, the struggle for ideas, and the emergence of new ideologies. Libra is associated with law, justice, and legal systems. So it's very possible that in the coming years, we will see significant changes in legal frameworks, international agreements, and concepts of fairness. Cancer represents security, family, and marriage. Our relationship to these themes may change dramatically. Traditionally, family was seen as the main source of stability. People felt they had to marry in order to feel secure. Today, that model is evolving, and people increasingly build stability on their own. Cancer also rules housing and real estate. We may see housing crises, new waves of migration, and changes in property markets. Housing could become increasingly difficult to afford. Cancer is also connected with children, so issues around fertility may become more visible, possibly influenced by environmental factors, pollution, chemicals, or modern lifestyles. Capricorn, in turn, represents governments, authority figures, large institutions, and international alliances. Significant transformations may occur in these areas. Institutions may be restructured, alliances may dissolve, or entire systems may be rebuilt. Because Aries is a rather aggressive sign, we may also see an arms race. Trade wars are possible, and in many ways, we are already seeing signs of this in global economic tensions. Demonstrations, protests, and even revolutions could become more common in some countries. So how does Neptune influence individuals? In its challenging expression, Neptune is associated with depression, addiction, alcohol, drugs, and a sense of being lost. It represents moments when a person feels disconnected from reality and unable to find direction. But in its positive expression, Neptune brings inspiration and creativity. It's music, poetry, film, photography, dance, and ballet. Everything connected with artistic expression. It also represents love, but a very idealized, spiritual kind of love. Neptune also symbolizes compassion, medicine, and healing. Pharmaceuticals and medications are part of Neptune's domain as well. When Neptune moves through a particular area of the chart, people often hold on to a hope or dream for a long time, only to realize later that it was an illusion. Because Neptune also represents fog, confusion, and deception, sometimes situations remain unclear for years. For example, complicated relationships, like affairs with married partners. That's a classic Neptune theme, especially if it moves through the fifth or seventh house. Another example, Neptune moving through the fourth house, the house of home and residence. People may emigrate believing a new country will make them happy. They live there for years, only to realize later that it isn't truly their place, and eventually they return home once Neptune changes signs and the illusion fades. Another important point, be cautious with investments when Neptune moves through the second or eighth house. Neptune can literally make money disappear. If an investment opportunity appears that promises quick profits, it's especially important to be careful. When Neptune moves through the first house, the house of identity, people may feel lost. They may not understand what they want or where to go next. This isn't clinical depression, but rather a feeling of uncertainty about one's path. A person may think, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know where I'm going. And this state can last for years until Neptune changes signs. Often it's connected with idealization, when we put too much faith in someone or something. Eventually, disappointment follows, because Neptune is not a practical planet. These are the more difficult expressions of Neptune. But on the positive side, Neptune can also bring fame and popularity, especially for people connected to film, theater, or show business. Magazine covers, public image, media presence, all of that is Neptune. It creates an image, an illusion, because fame itself is something intangible. It's not something you can touch, it's the image people see. What makes this transition particularly powerful is that Saturn is involved. Saturn represents restructuring. It's like building with bricks. Something is dismantled and then rebuilt from the ground up. And now, let's look at how this transit will affect each zodiac sign and which area of life Neptune will activate for you. We'll begin with Aries, and then go through each sign one by one. Aries, you may feel this transit more strongly than many other signs, and the first to notice it will likely be those with ascendants in Aries, Libra, Cancer, or Capricorn. You may already be sensing that something in your life is beginning to shift. Neptune will be moving through your first house. If you have an Aries ascendant, or if you're a March Aries, born in the very first degrees of the sign, you may feel this influence more strongly than others. In fact, over the next 14 years, you'll be among those who experience Neptune's energy most vividly. On one hand, this can be an incredible time for creativity. A powerful wave of inspiration may arrive. You might suddenly decide to write a book, even if you've never considered it before. Some of you may start learning to sing or begin participating in creative competitions. And Aries does enjoy a good challenge. Since Neptune is strongly connected with the arts, you may feel drawn to dancing, performing, or entering creative contests. Neptune is also associated with water and the ocean. Because of this, some of you may develop an interest in water sports, swimming, boating, kayaking, or open water swimming. You might even learn to swim and eventually start participating in competitions. But Neptune is also connected with ideas, faith, and spirituality. You may discover a goal or vision that you truly believe in. There may be a sudden pull towards spiritual practices, yoga, Reiki, esoteric studies, or exploring religion. For some people, this can bring a sense of mission or calling. For example, you might develop an interest in psychology and feel a desire to help others, perhaps even turning it into a profession. In any case, there will likely be a strong belief in something. Ideally, that belief is directed toward yourself, because the first house represents the self, your intentions, your goals, your personal path. But Neptune also brings idealization, and sometimes we start seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. At the same time, this can be a wonderful period for visualization and manifestation. when you imagine your goals and gradually begin attracting them into your life. It's also an excellent time to start charitable projects, because Neptune is closely connected with compassion and the desire to help others. Your image and appearance may also change. The first house rules how you look and how others perceive you. You may start to appear more mysterious or magnetic to people around you. Neptune can also bring popularity. Your name might become more recognized, and people may begin talking about you more. Ideally, of course, this happens because of positive achievements and meaningful events in your life. However, there is also an important point here. I would strongly recommend being careful with alcohol, and especially with drugs, because Neptune can increase the attraction to altered states of consciousness. Sometimes there may simply be a desire to escape reality. This doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's very subtle. For example, you may feel the urge to leave the city, live closer to nature, spend more time near water, or go fishing somewhere quiet, far away from crowds. Now let's talk about relationships. There may be situations where your partner is physically distant for a period of time. For example, you might live in different cities or even different countries because of work, studies, or travel. Sometimes a partner may work at sea, go on long voyages, or travel frequently. When Neptune moves through the first house, it activates the relationship axis, which often brings idealization of a partner. Why does this happen? Because you may not see each other very often. Perhaps you met online, or you only see each other once every few months while living separate lives most of the time. Or your partner's work may involve long absences. In other words, the relationship may go through periods of distance and separation, and under those circumstances, it becomes very easy to fill in the gaps with your imagination. Can Neptune bring a separation this year from someone you are already living with? Yes, that can happen. Sometimes, during major planetary shifts, unexpected situations arise. For example, a couple may have been living together peacefully, without major conflicts, and suddenly one partner says, "I'm leaving," almost out of nowhere. Or other surprising changes may begin to unfold in relationships and in life in general. When Neptune enters the first house, it is leaving your 12th house, and the 12th house is connected with endings and completion. Because of this, something in your life may begin to dissolve and fade away. This doesn't necessarily mean a relationship. It could be any part of life that you are already ready to release. When Neptune moves from the 12th house into the first, there can be a feeling that something, or someone, is being left in the past. For example, you might move to a new place, and with that move, your entire environment begins to change. People you used to interact with regularly may gradually disappear from your life. So this period may become the beginning of a new chapter, when the old quietly dissolves, making space for something new to emerge. Taurus, Neptune is now entering your 12th house. And Neptune actually feels very much at home here, because the 12th house is connected with secrets, the inner world, solitude, and deep self-discovery. Because of this, many of you may feel a stronger desire to spend time alone. For example, you might immerse yourself in research, science, or analytical work, working in a laboratory, an archive, or any environment where a person is deeply focused and often working independently. This can also include work connected with isolation or remote locations, working on a ship, rotational work schedules, long trips, or voyages, anything that takes you away from ordinary daily life for periods of time. You may also develop a strong interest in spiritual practices and inner exploration. This could include things like regression hypnosis, meditation, Reiki, gratitude practices, and various spiritual techniques. Some of you may feel drawn toward religion, visiting sacred places, traveling to spiritual sites, or spending time in temples. Many may also become interested in esoteric studies. Overall, this can become a period of profound inner growth. You may begin exploring yourself more deeply, discovering your abilities, and over time, you might even start sharing this knowledge with others. Very often, we study ourselves not only for our own sake, but also in order to help others. Some of you may begin working with clients or students, and for others, this transit may even bring a change of profession. This period can also be connected with charity and service. The 12th house is strongly associated with compassion and helping those in need. You might participate in charitable projects, create a foundation, or start an organization that supports people or animals. Sometimes this may appear through humanitarian missions, traveling to other countries, or remote regions in order to help people. It could look like international aid work, or even employment abroad within institutions such as embassies or other private organizations. The 12th house is also often linked to long, deeply immersive creative processes. For example, you might begin writing a book or working on a creative project that unfolds slowly over a long period of time and with great depth. Sometimes this happens behind the scenes, when you're involved in something meaningful, but people around you may not even know exactly what you're working on. Projects during this time may be private, confidential, or simply not public yet. Sometimes the 12th house can also bring secret relationships. For example, a romance that is not publicly known for one reason or another. This doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, but it is a theme that can appear during this transit. On the more challenging side, the 12th house can sometimes bring escapism, things like alcohol, addictive behaviors, rehabilitation programs, or psychological healing in therapeutic environments. But this isn't always about problems. Sometimes it simply represents a period of deep healing and recovery. It may also appear through caring for someone else, for example, visiting a relative in a hospital or nursing home, or supporting someone who needs help. There may also be work connected with hospitals, clinics, or even the creation of your own retreat center, a place where people come to rest, recover, and engage in spiritual or wellness practices. During this time, it will be especially important to allow yourself proper rest. The 12th house is connected with sleep, restoration, and retreat, so giving yourself space for quiet, recovery, and reflection will be essential. You may travel on spiritual journeys or even begin organizing such retreats yourself. Sometimes during this period, people choose a more secluded lifestyle, moving closer to nature, to an island, or to a small village. When it comes to health, it's important to stay attentive. Under Neptune, it can sometimes be difficult to reach a clear diagnosis. A person may feel unwell, yet medical tests don't immediately show a specific cause. In such cases, it can be helpful to focus on supporting the body. Proper nutrition, hydration, detoxification, and overall care for your physical well-being. Of course, with any health symptoms, it's important to consult medical professionals and, if necessary, seek a second opinion. Water in general may become a meaningful theme during this period, since Neptune is closely connected with water. And there is one more important point. The 12th house is the house of letting go. Neptune can gradually dissolve certain things in your life, people, situations, or old values. Over these 14 years, something may slowly fade away, and that is completely natural. Sometimes people from your circle quietly drift out of your life, and things that once seemed extremely important suddenly lose their meaning. But in reality, this is a process of purification. What remains is only what is truly authentic and meaningful, and this period can transform you very deeply from within. You may come to understand yourself, your talents, and your inner strength much more clearly, and perhaps even discover your true purpose. Next, Gemini. For you, Neptune is entering the 11th house. The 11th house represents our social life, friends, gatherings, networking, events, communities, and the circles we move in. It's about where we go, who we interact with, and the people who surround us. For Gemini, this theme is naturally very familiar and comfortable. The 11th house is also connected with the internet and the online world, social media, online work, and everything we do in digital spaces. Here, Neptune can significantly expand your social circle. Neptune is a planet without boundaries, so you may suddenly find yourself surrounded by completely new people and a new environment. At first, you might even idealize these connections, feeling as though you've finally found the community you've always dreamed of. Among these people, there may be influential figures, mentors, patrons, or individuals with status. But it's important to remember that Neptune can sometimes promise more than it ultimately delivers. At the same time, this can be a very favorable placement for recognition and popularity. The 11th house is associated with achievements, results, and public acknowledgement. Something you've been working on may begin attracting attention, and people may start talking about you. For example, you might be invited to an event where awards are presented. You could receive a prize, recognition, or even a title. This could be professional recognition, such as being named one of the top specialists in your field. Some of you may hold exhibitions of your work or photography. Exhibitions, seminars, conferences, and professional gatherings are all connected with the 11th house. You may participate in these events, represent your organization, or even organize them yourself. These could be large-scale events, international gatherings, or major collaborative projects involving many people. And Neptune loves anything grand in scale. The theme of charity may also appear. Neptune is associated with compassion, so you might become involved with charitable foundations, associations, or humanitarian organizations. Sometimes during this transit, a person may appear in your life whom you deeply admire, a mentor, teacher, or thought leader. You might be inspired by their ideas and follow their guidance for a long time. However, with Neptune, there can sometimes be disillusionment later on, as the initial idealization fades. In general, Neptune can also test friendships. Some friends may gradually drift away or quietly disappear from your life. And after about 14 years, you may look back and realize that you are surrounded by a completely different circle of people. This can happen because your values, worldview, and lifestyle evolve, and you naturally begin connecting with people who share your direction in life. Meanwhile, distance may grow between you and former friends. Occasionally, there may also be situations involving deception or betrayal from friends. But with Neptune, these truths usually reveal themselves over time. On the positive side, this is a very powerful position for creative visibility and public popularity. Neptune is strongly connected with creativity. For example, your song might be played on the radio. You might be invited onto television, participate in fashion shows, or even appear on the cover of a magazine. The theme of long-distance love may also arise. Neptune often creates distance. For example, a relationship with someone from another city or another country, where you don't see each other very often. In such cases, strong romantic idealization can occur, and the relationship may feel almost magical. For some people, this period may also bring the birth of a child, especially during the early phase of Neptune's transit. In other cases, Neptune may create distance with children. For example, an adult son or daughter might move to another city or country and begin living independently. But overall, the 11th house almost always brings more communication, more connections, more events, and greater social visibility. In the coming years, your social life may become much more active, dynamic, and full of new experiences. Now let's talk about Cancer. Neptune is entering your 10th house, the house of career, public status, and life direction. It looks like Neptune may gradually dissolve some of the goals you've had up until now, while at the same time bringing completely new ones. This influence may be felt especially strongly by those with a Cancer ascendant. The 10th house represents our career path, reputation, and social standing. When Neptune enters this part of the chart, it can begin to blur old structures. For example, your work may take you somewhere new, another city, or even another country. You might be relocated for your job, or you may decide to move on your own. Sometimes Neptune can literally dissolve a previous career path. For instance, the company where you worked may close, or a business you were involved in may come to an end. In other cases, a person may simply lose interest in what they were doing before and decide to close that chapter, perhaps by selling a business or changing direction. But very often, this happens because a new, more meaningful direction begins to appear. Neptune is associated with purpose, ideals, and service, so your career may gradually shift toward helping people, charity work, or socially meaningful projects. You may also step into a new role or position because the 10th house is closely connected with status and professional recognition. Neptune is linked with compassion, humanitarian work, medicine, and caring for people or animals. Because of this, you may take a position in a charitable organization or become actively involved in humanitarian projects. Sometimes this transit brings a complete change in professional direction. For example, someone might have had a very practical career, an accountant, a manager, a chef, and then Neptune gradually redirects them toward psychology, spirituality, or healing practices. A person might leave accounting and begin working as a coach, therapist, or spiritual practitioner. Neptune can also heighten intuition. You may start having vivid dreams, feel that you understand people more deeply, or develop a stronger interest in spiritual practices. At the same time, the 10th house is also a public platform, the place where a person becomes visible. You may start attracting more attention. Recognition, public visibility, or awards may come your way, and your business or professional influence may grow. Neptune is like the ocean, vast and boundless. Sometimes your influence can expand in a similar way. The 10th house represents influence over others, students, employees, clients, or even the public. But with that expansion comes greater responsibility. The 10th house is connected with reputation, while Neptune can sometimes be associated with illusion or confusion. That's why it becomes especially important to act with integrity. Any unclear or questionable situations could eventually come to light and affect your reputation. Your responsibilities may also grow. For example, you might need to provide more support for your parents, help your family financially, or take on new responsibilities connected with your children's education. There may also be greater responsibility toward employees, students, or people who depend on you. Your career could become more creative or spiritually oriented. Your public image may appear more compassionate, empathetic, or inspiring. Some of you may move into healing professions, since Neptune is often associated with healers. Sometimes Neptune leads us toward our true calling. We may lose one job, but that very change eventually brings us exactly where we are meant to be. The 10th house is also sometimes connected with parents, especially the father. Neptune can blur or dissolve authority figures. Someone who once held authority in your life may move away, relocate, or gradually become more distant. This can also apply to bosses or supervisors. For example, there may be a conflict with a manager, after which you leave your job and no longer work with that person. Sometimes Neptune brings behind-the-scenes work where people around you may not fully understand what you actually do professionally. In the more challenging version of this transit, there may be moments of uncertainty about your direction. The 10th house is about goals, and sometimes a person may temporarily feel unsure about where they're heading next. In those moments, it's important to keep exploring different paths and possibilities so you don't fall into stagnation. Neptune can also be connected with periods of emotional vulnerability, especially when a person's social role changes. For example, someone might retire and suddenly ask themselves, "Who am I now?" Before, they were a leader or executive, and now their role has changed. That's why it becomes very important to discover a new sense of purpose, whether through creativity, helping others, or starting something new. Your status itself may also change. For example, you might become a parent, which is already a completely new social role. In some cases, there could also be a divorce if disappointment arises in a relationship. Sometimes under Neptune, a person may feel as if they are waking up from a dream. You may suddenly realize that someone you relied on is not quite the person you once imagined them to be. But the opposite can also happen. A Neptune-influenced marriage can sometimes feel incredibly beautiful, almost like something out of a fairy tale. There can be deep admiration and idealization of a partner. The key is simply to stay aware and grounded, and not lose sight of reality. In the best-case scenario, a partner may work in a Neptunian field, as an actor, photographer, artist, doctor, scientist, biologist, or psychologist. In that case, Neptune's energy can unfold in a truly beautiful way. Because Neptune is also the planet of dreams and magic, and sometimes it really can bring something special into the life of Cancer, a story that feels almost like a fairy tale. Now let's talk about Leo. For you, Neptune is entering the ninth house of your chart. The ninth house is the sector of travel, higher education, expanding your horizons, and broadening your worldview. For Neptune, this is actually a very strong placement. During this period, the way you see the world can expand dramatically, opening up entirely new possibilities. There is even potential here for greater recognition or a wider public presence. You may begin traveling more, visiting different countries, and exploring new cultures. Some of you might start thinking about living abroad, emigrating, or getting involved in international work or projects. The ninth house is closely connected with foreign countries, so your life may begin to include more global connections. This is also the house of recognition and visibility, especially beyond your home country. Your talents could be noticed by a much wider audience. For example, your projects, creative work, or business might reach an international level. This could happen through global events, collaborations with people from other countries, or expanding your work into new markets. The ninth house is also linked with higher education and long-term study. You may begin an important educational path, enrolling in a university, earning a new qualification, or immersing yourself deeply in a particular field of study. This could be especially connected with Neptune-related fields, such as medicine, psychology, art, film, photography, music, or dance. New dreams and ambitions may also emerge, goals you may never have imagined for yourself before. Sometimes all it takes is seeing something inspiring, a film, a book, or someone else's story, and suddenly you think, why not me? During this period, relationships with foreigners or people from different cultural backgrounds are also possible. However, Neptune can sometimes bring distance. For example, a relationship where partners live in different cities or countries for a period of time. There may also be opportunities to purchase property abroad, especially near water or on an island, since Neptune is strongly associated with water. The ninth house is also traditionally connected with grandchildren, so in some families, a new generation may arrive during this period. Overall, this transit often feels like a real expansion of life. It can feel as if new horizons are opening up, allowing you to see the world in a broader way and move beyond your usual boundaries. But Neptune always has another side. Sometimes there can be idealization of a teacher, mentor, or philosophy. A person may become deeply inspired by a particular belief system or spiritual guide, only to later realize that it wasn't truly their path. The ninth house governs religion, philosophy, and personal beliefs, so it's important to maintain discernment and critical thinking. In more extreme cases, Neptune can lead to blind faith or fascination with ideas that eventually bring disappointment. The ninth house is also connected with the search for life's meaning. If someone struggles to find that meaning, there can sometimes be a sense of emptiness. In Neptune's more difficult expression, this may lead to escapism. That's why it's best to channel Neptune's energy into learning, personal growth, travel, creativity, and expanding your worldview. When used this way, this transit can open truly inspiring and far-reaching opportunities for Leo. Now let's talk about Virgo. For you, Neptune is entering the eighth house of your chart. The eighth house is primarily connected with other people's money and shared resources. A partner's finances, joint business ventures, investments, inheritances, loans, alimony, insurance, and government benefits. With Neptune here, there can be big hopes and expectations tied to money. For example, you may start planning joint business projects, investments, or shared financial ventures. Sometimes there may be hope for financial support through a partner, for instance, marrying someone wealthy or getting involved in what appears to be a very profitable project. However, it's important to remember that Neptune can create illusions. It may promise a lot, but those expectations are not always fulfilled. Money under Neptune can sometimes come just as easily as it disappears, so financial matters require extra caution during this period. The eighth house is also connected with inheritance, so these topics may come up over the coming years. But even if money does come in, it's important to manage it carefully. Neptune symbolizes fluidity, so finances may flow out faster than expected if there isn't enough structure. Sometimes this transit can bring money from other people or institutions, from partners, organizations, foundations, or government programs. However, these sources may be unstable. For example, payments, grants, or financial support could suddenly stop. Because of this, it's especially important now to approach financial decisions carefully. If you're considering joint investments or business partnerships, everything should be calculated thoroughly and ideally formalized through legal agreements. Neptune doesn't work well with vagueness, and financial arrangements based only on trust can become risky. This also applies to marriage, especially when shared finances are involved. In some situations, it may be wise to consider clear financial agreements or prenuptial arrangements to avoid complications later on. The eighth house is also connected with a partner's finances, so changes in your spouse's or partner's financial situation may affect your life as well. For example, their job, business, or income could go through significant changes. This house is also related to loans and debts, so it's important to be especially careful with borrowed money. It's best to avoid risky financial obligations or loans taken under unfavorable conditions. But the eighth house is not only about finances. It is also a deeply psychological sector, connected with transformation, inner crises, and the uncovering of hidden truths. During this period, certain secrets or hidden stories may come to light, and things that once seemed confusing may finally begin to make sense. There may also be expenses related to psychology, therapy, healing, spiritual practices, or retreats. Sometimes these are investments in your own recovery, inner transformation, or support for people close to you. Sometimes Neptune in this house creates the expectation that your financial situation will improve through other people, for example, through a partner or a new project. It may feel as if things are about to change and become easier. But it's important to stay grounded and maintain a realistic perspective. Neptune can sometimes paint a very beautiful picture of the future, a new partner, a new business, new opportunities. Yet reality may turn out to be quite different. So the main advice for this period is maximum financial caution. Double-check everything, calculate carefully, and try not to rely on promises of quick or easy money that seem too good to be true. Now let's talk about Libra. This transit may be felt especially strongly by those with a Libra ascendant. For you, Neptune is entering the seventh house, the sector of marriage, partnerships, love, and all kinds of relationships. Because of this, the theme of relationships may become especially active in your life. Unfortunately, Neptune can sometimes bring the dissolution of relationships. It can happen that a person wasn't even thinking about separation, and then suddenly something becomes clear. The situation shifts, the truth comes into focus, and the partners go their separate ways. The seventh house is the house of partnerships in general, marriage, divorce, and relationships with other people. Not only romantic ones. It also includes business partners and even open rivals or competitors. Sometimes people who were once close can eventually find themselves on opposite sides. Neptune in relationships brings fog, expectations, idealization, and sometimes distance. Very often, there is a feeling that your partner is the perfect person and that everything will work out with them, even if friends or family say the relationship may not be the best match. Neptune can influence perception so strongly that you think, it will be different for me. But over time, the fog begins to clear. Things that were once overlooked become obvious, and sometimes the realization comes, this isn't the right person for me. Sometimes relationships simply don't move to the next level. People may live together, but a wedding never happens. There may be promises like, soon we'll move in together, or things will change soon. And then suddenly, one partner says they no longer want to continue the relationship. One of the most common themes under Neptune is idealizing a partner. Sometimes this can involve a relationship with someone who is already in another relationship, For example, a married man or a married woman. And sometimes a person may not even realize this at first, especially if the partner lives in another city or country. In other cases, everything is known from the beginning, but there is hope. They'll get divorced, or things will change soon. Neptune can keep that hope alive for a very long time. These kinds of stories can sometimes last for years. From the outside, it's easy to say, you should leave this situation. But when someone is inside it, under Neptune's influence, it can be very difficult. Many people later say, it felt like I was under a spell. Interestingly, Neptune really is associated with hypnosis and altered states of consciousness. Another possible scenario is distance in relationships. For example, partners may live in different cities or even different countries, or one partner may travel frequently for work and spend long periods away. Sometimes there may also be high expectations placed on a partner. For example, I'll marry a successful person and they'll help my career. Or, I'll marry someone with high status and that will open doors for me. Sometimes these unions do happen, but quite often it turns out that these were expectations or fantasies rather than reality. Neptune can also create another unusual situation. A person simply disappears. They stop calling, stop responding, and for a long time, you may not understand what happened. Only later might the truth become clear. If we talk about business partnerships, it's very important to be cautious. Even if a project looks wonderful on the surface, check everything carefully and ask questions. Neptune is the planet of illusions. Sometimes a person truly believes in their idea, but in reality, it may not have a solid foundation. So if you're planning to invest money, time, or energy into something, it's better not to rely only on words. The same advice applies to marriage. When Neptune is moving through the seventh house, it often turns out that things are not exactly as they seemed at the beginning. It's better to take time to really get to know a person and avoid rushing into serious commitments. At the same time, Neptune can bring a partner with a creative or spiritual profession, an actor, photographer, artist, dancer, or someone connected with psychology or medicine. However, there is another possibility to be aware of. A partner may struggle with addictions because Neptune is associated with alcohol and other substances. In such situations, it's especially important to stay aware. The most challenging side of Neptune appears when a person loses clarity and makes important decisions while under a kind of emotional or psychological influence. So the main advice for Libra during this period is not to rush. Take your time to really get to know people, check the facts, and avoid making major relationship decisions too quickly while Neptune is moving through your seventh house. Now let's talk about Scorpio. For you, Neptune is entering the sixth house of your chart. The sixth house represents our daily life: work, routines, responsibilities, schedules, everything we deal with on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't matter whether you have a formal job or not. Everyone has daily tasks and obligations. And now Neptune is entering this area of your life. For most people, this will be connected primarily with work and employment. Neptune can sometimes dissolve an existing job or routine. For example, a workplace may close, a company, shop, salon, or another place where you worked. Or you may simply realize that you no longer want to continue doing that kind of work. There can also be other scenarios. For instance, your usual lifestyle may temporarily change because of children. You might go on parental leave expecting it to last a year, and then the situation unfolds in a way that keeps you away from work for a longer period of time. At the same time, Neptune can bring a new kind of work aligned with its energy. These are fields connected with helping people, compassion, and creativity. For example, work related to medicine, psychology, charity, or helping animals. It could be a laboratory, a medical center, or a psychological practice. Scorpios, by the way, often make excellent psychologists because they naturally understand people on a deep emotional level. This can also include esoteric fields and spiritual practices, anything intuitive, subtle, or invisible. Things we can't physically touch, but that operate on the level of energy, intuition, and inner awareness. During this transit, it's best to focus on work that you truly believe in. Neptune is the planet of meaning, vision, and inspiration. Sometimes this transit can also appear through caring for someone, for example, helping elderly parents or relatives. In that case, part of your energy may go towards supporting and taking care of others. There is also an important point here. Try not to fall into the role of the rescuer or the martyr. Neptune sometimes brings the desire to help everyone, support everyone, or even financially carry someone else. Helping others is wonderful, but it's important not to take it to the point where you begin sacrificing yourself and later feel exhausted or resentful. The sixth house is also connected with health, and Neptune is the planet of sleep. So during this period, it will be especially important for Scorpios to get enough rest. Sometimes under Neptune, it can be difficult to reach a clear diagnosis. A person may feel unwell, run tests, and yet doctors say everything looks normal. Neptune represents fog and uncertainty, so it may take time to understand the true cause of certain conditions. Because of this, it's very important to reduce stress and support your overall well-being. The sixth house also represents everyday stress and small ongoing problems. If possible, try to remove from your life anything that constantly creates tension. Neptune generally doesn't like rigid schedules. It struggles with strict routines like working from 9 to 5 every day. It prefers flexibility and flow. Because of this, many Scorpios may feel more comfortable with flexible work arrangements, remote work, or running their own business, where they can manage their own time. Sometimes Neptune also brings situations where a person studies a new profession, earns a diploma, and then realizes the work is very different from what they imagined. As a result, they may change direction again. This is also very typical for Neptune. First there is a dream, and later comes the realization that the path should be different. At the same time, Neptune can also bring a beautiful scenario: the job of your dreams. Sometimes something that begins as just a hobby may seem like it could never become a real profession. But if you start dedicating time to something you truly love, it can absolutely turn into your work. And one more important point concerns health and lifestyle. Under Neptune, it's best to be careful with alcohol and especially with any substances that alter consciousness. During this period, it's important to protect your health and take good care of your body. Now let's talk about Sagittarius. For you, Neptune is entering the fifth house of your chart. The fifth house is the sector of children, romance, falling in love, creativity, and self-expression. It's also the house of talents, the ways a person naturally expresses themselves and the things they do especially well. Neptune here can reveal your abilities in a very beautiful way. You may start exploring creative activities. For example, joining a theater group, writing books, poetry, or music. Some of you may begin performing, giving lectures, sharing your knowledge, or presenting your work to an audience. If you play a musical instrument, there may be opportunities for performances, tours, or working with the public. Everything connected with creativity and self-expression may become a major focus for you in the coming years. Many of you may also develop new hobbies. The purpose of this period is to understand who you truly are and where your real talent lies. So it's completely natural if you experiment with different creative directions. Neptune may also express itself through the theme of romance. Sometimes it brings a powerful feeling of being in love and idealizing a partner. Relationships may feel almost like a fairy tale. At the same time, Neptune often creates situations that remain unresolved or unclear. For example, people may be dating or even living together, but the relationship somehow never moves to the next stage. A wedding keeps getting postponed, decisions are delayed, and this situation can continue for quite a long time. Sometimes these kinds of stories remain in a person's memory as a deep and unforgettable love, even if the relationship never leads to marriage. But Neptune also has another side. Especially now, since it has only recently entered this sign, a time when its influence can feel particularly strong. This can be a period when things begin to become clearer, when the fog slowly starts to lift. Sometimes hidden truths may come to light. For example, you may discover that a person is already involved in another relationship, creating a love triangle. Under Neptune, there are often promises that a divorce will happen soon, that everything will change, that you just need to wait a little longer. And these kinds of stories can sometimes continue for years. That's why it's important to try to look at the situation realistically and avoid building your life around promises alone. Sometimes Neptune shows up in a completely different way. There may be a period when you simply don't feel interested in relationships at all. For example, after a divorce, or when you are completely focused on your own projects, opening a studio, developing your creativity, or building a business. There may also be developments related to children. For instance, after separating from a partner, there could be some distance between you and your children. Or the opposite may happen. The children stay with you, and you take on greater responsibility for raising them. Sometimes Neptune can bring self-sacrifice for the sake of children. For example, parents may work very hard, or even take out loans to pay for their children's education. There may also be a natural kind of distance. Children grow up, move away to study, or begin living independently. The fifth house is also connected with education and teaching. During this period, some people may create projects related to children, such as schools, clubs, or creative studios. Others may find themselves in the opposite role, becoming students again and dedicating a lot of time to learning. Another possible theme is helping children through charitable work or projects aimed at supporting young people. Now let's talk about Capricorn. For you, Neptune is entering the fourth house of your chart. The fourth house represents home, family, parents, and the place where we live. So in the coming years, changes may take place in these areas of life. Very often, Neptune here brings relocations or moves. For example, you might move to another city or even another country. Sometimes people relocate for quite a long time, several years. And later, when Neptune completes its cycle, they may move again. There may also be a theme of buying property. You could purchase an apartment, a house, or a piece of land, live there for some time, or rent it out. Then, years later, you might decide to sell it and move somewhere else. Neptune can also draw you closer to water. This could mean living near the sea, a lake, on an island, or simply somewhere close to water. Some people even develop a desire to live in a more secluded place, for example, on an island or somewhere far from the noise of big cities. The fourth house is also connected with parents, and Neptune often creates distance. Sometimes this is simply physical distance. For instance, you may begin living in another city or country. Other times, the distance may be emotional, where people communicate less or gradually grow apart. During this period, important family events may also occur, because the fourth house is connected with the entire family lineage and your roots. Another characteristic of Neptune is family secrets. Sometimes during this transit, stories that were never spoken about before may come to light. For example, you might learn something new about your relatives, your family background, or your parents. Occasionally, unexpected facts are revealed. Relatives may appear that no one previously knew about, or old family stories may suddenly come to the surface. Neptune can also manifest through living or working in remote places. For example, working on a ship, living on an island, or participating in retreats or projects in isolated locations. There may also be rotational work schedules, where a person lives away from home for a certain period of time and then returns. Neptune is also connected with nighttime, so some people may find themselves working night shifts, especially in professions related to medicine or caregiving. If we talk about real estate, it's important to be attentive. Neptune can sometimes bring confusion or financial losses, particularly when it comes to quick property deals, buying and immediately reselling. Because of this, any real estate transactions should be checked carefully. At the same time, Neptune can sometimes bring inheritance connected with property. For example, a house, an apartment, a family cottage, or money from the sale of family assets. There's also one more point that astrologers often mention when Neptune moves through the fourth house: water in the home. Neptune is strongly associated with water. Because of this, it's wise to pay attention to plumbing, bathrooms, appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, anything connected with water. Sometimes leaks or flooding can occur, and occasionally, quite unexpectedly. There are even situations where people go on vacation and something breaks at home, allowing water to run for a long time before anyone notices. So it's a good idea to check these things periodically and, if possible, have home insurance. Many of you may already be starting to think about moving, renovating, changing homes, or making some kind of shift related to home and family. Next, Aquarius. For you, Neptune is entering the third house of your chart. First, an important point. Neptune is leaving your second house, the sector of money and personal finances. So if over the last 14 years your financial situation felt unstable, money coming and going, jobs changing, income being unpredictable, that period may now be coming to an end. Sometimes when Neptune leaves the second house, there can be a change in your source of income. For example, an old job, salary, or financial support may disappear. But often this happens so that you can move toward a different kind of work that suits you better. Occasionally, during this transition, money from other sources may appear. For example, an inheritance or financial support from outside. Now, Neptune will spend the next 14 years in your third house, and the third house is connected with communication, learning, everyday interactions, your immediate environment, and developing new skills. It's very likely that you will begin forming a new social circle. These may be people connected by a shared philosophy, similar views, or a common worldview. Sometimes this happens because a person begins learning something new. You might take courses, earn a new qualification, or develop modern skills. Under Neptune, this is often something creative or connected with emerging technologies. Right now, entirely new fields are appearing. For example, artificial intelligence, digital content creation, writing, visual design, and generating ideas using new technologies. Things that until recently seemed almost futuristic. So if you feel like you haven't quite found your place yet, or if changes suddenly happen in your work, don't be afraid to study and learn something new. Developing new skills may lead you to an entirely new source of income. The third house can also bring a move or relocation. Sometimes this means moving to another city or a different neighborhood. Some people may choose to live closer to water, since Neptune is strongly associated with water. During this period, many people begin engaging more in creative activities: drawing, singing, dancing, writing books, teaching courses, or sharing knowledge with others. The third house is the house of skills and information, so you may not only learn, but also teach or guide others, for example, through workshops, classes, or mentoring. But communication and your immediate environment remain the central themes here. Neptune may gradually change the circle of people around you. Sometimes it literally dissolves old connections. People who are currently close to you may slowly fade out of your life. This can also involve relatives, because the third house is associated with siblings. Distance may appear. For example, you may live in different cities, or communication may simply become less frequent. Sometimes the reason can be very ordinary: different life paths, disagreements, or changing priorities. The same may happen with neighbors or acquaintances. People may move away, or simply drift out of your everyday life. At the same time, new people may appear, and you may even idealize some of them. For example, a teacher, mentor, blogger, or thought leader whose ideas deeply inspire you. You might follow their philosophy, read their books, or listen to their lectures. There may also be several relocations or a period of searching for your place in the world. Sometimes people literally explore different cities or countries to understand where they truly feel at home. Something similar may happen in your professional life. You might try different directions, courses, and skills until you find what truly resonates with you. For example, someone might try one profession and then another: massage therapy, coaching, teaching, or practical hands-on skills. All of this fits within the symbolism of the third house. Sometimes this may even involve education connected with the medical field, since Neptune is associated with medicine. For example, studying to become a nurse or medical assistant. And sometimes a person begins a project or career during the transit of a planet through a particular house. They may develop that work for many years, and when the planet eventually leaves that sector, they naturally close that chapter and begin something new. So you may experience something similar. You might start a new activity now, devote many years to it, and later feel that this phase of life has been completed and that you're ready to move forward into something different. And Pisces. For the past 14 years, Neptune has been moving through your first house, through your own sign. Many of you may have felt this period quite strongly. At times, it may have felt like being in limbo, as if you were searching for yourself, but couldn't quite figure out where to go next, what you truly want to do, or what your purpose might be. For some people, this may have played out through relationships, especially for those with a Pisces ascendant. There may have been a strong tendency to idealize a partner. Everything could seem perfect, almost like a beautiful picture, as if the relationship looked flawless from the outside. And now, as Neptune begins to leave your sign, some of you may start to feel a sense of clarity, as if the fog is finally lifting. Sometimes at this stage, a deception may come to light. For example, in a relationship or a marriage, someone might suddenly realize they no longer want to stay with a partner, either in their personal life or in business. You might look at a person and think, "How did I not see this before?" But now Neptune is entering your second house for the next 14 years, the area connected with money and personal values. Here, money may come through talents and creative expression. For example, through music, performances, film, art, books, photography, or anything that involves inspiration, imagination, and visual imagery. It can also include professions connected with psychology, medicine, helping people, or charitable work. Any field where compassion and working with people play an important role. Income may also come through concerts, performances, visibility, and public recognition. However, when it comes to investments, it's important to be very cautious. Neptune is known for creating beautiful illusions, things that look promising, but may turn out to be a mirage. Someone might present a project to you very convincingly, showing it in such an attractive way that it feels like the perfect opportunity. But in reality, things may turn out very differently. That's why it's better to avoid risky investments, financial pyramids, lotteries, or any schemes that promise easy money. If something looks too perfect or too easy, it's very likely an illusion. Neptune can also dissolve existing sources of income. For example, in the past, you may have received financial support from parents, relatives, or a partner, and now that support may gradually disappear. Sometimes one job ends simply to make space for something new. But the second house isn't only about money, it's also about our values. During this period, something interesting may happen. Things that once seemed extremely important may suddenly lose their significance. You may realize that certain goals, possessions, or dreams no longer resonate with you. This can reflect a shift in your value system. In business partnerships, it's also wise to stay cautious. If shared investments are involved, make sure to check everything carefully. Under this transit, some people may try to take advantage of your resources. If we're talking about marriage, especially when finances are shared, it may sometimes be wise to consider clear financial agreements. At the same time, Neptune also has a very beautiful side. If you're involved in something you truly believe in, your opportunities may suddenly expand in unexpected ways. Neptune doesn't like rigid plans. Sometimes it simply brings a person to the right place and the right people. You might watch a film, see a performance, or read a book, and suddenly realize, I could do that too. And then your talent begins to generate income. For example, if you have the ability to truly listen to people, this could lead to a career in psychology. If you paint, someone might see your work and offer you an exhibition. If you sing, play an instrument, or perform, that could also become a source of income. The second house is also connected with the voice. Speaking, singing, performing, and working with words. Anything related to imagery, fantasy, and imagination also belongs to Neptune. Photography, cinema, art, and visual projects. And right now, as artificial intelligence and new creative technologies are developing rapidly, this could become a very interesting direction for Pisces. If some of you decide to learn these tools, it could open up a powerful new source of income. And that's how Neptune's transit may play out for the zodiac signs. May it bring us inspiration, creativity, and new opportunities. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new astrology forecasts.